Hello, everyone. If you're watching this online, you are watching the South Florida Tech Podcast, a weekly show where we bring you the awesome, innovative people building our South Florida tech community. Each week, we'll introduce you to one of the Sunshine State's top tech leaders, learn more about who they are, what they do, and have some fun conversation along the way. Our podcast is of course, presented by the South Florida Tech Association, a nonprofit dedicated to building South Florida into a tech hub. And I'm your host, Joe Russo, the president and CEO. First of all, shout out to our sponsors for the podcast, Emerge Americas. Each year, global enterprises, disruptive technology, and elite startups are highlighted at Emerge's premier tech event, Connecting the Americas. The event is held in Miami Beach and to date has hosted over 40 countries and people from over 40 countries and featured over 250 speakers from around the world. They're transforming the South Florida Tech Hub by connecting entrepreneurs, investors, and leading business executives. So thank you so much to them and their team for all of their support, and best of luck to them as they're planning the Emerge for 2021. Today on our podcast, we are very lucky to have the new Chief Technology Officer from Office Depot, who just joined in July. His name is Terry Leeper. Terry Leeper. He previously held executive positions at Amazon and Microsoft, and most recently had as the head of product in tech for Amazon Business for the past 6 years. Prior to that, he was also director of software development for Amazon's retail systems platforms. And before Amazon, he was at Microsoft for 12 years, where he held the positions of director of platform strategy while living in England, and then as director of the developer division while living in China. In addition to that, he has 2 degrees in computer science and electrical engineering from Texas A&M, where he also sits on the advisory board for the College of Engineering. And on a personal note, he has one daughter who's actually an undergrad at Texas A&M, and another, actually 2 daughters, one who's in optometry school and another who's a freshman. And he's married as a resident of Austin, Texas, with 2 dogs at home. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast here today, Terry.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Joe, for having me here.
Yeah, and I almost aced that introduction, so apologies for mixing it up once or twice there. But why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I think I've been in the software industry for quite a while. I was only 9 years old when I started Microsoft, so I'm much younger than it seems by being 20 years in the between Amazon and Microsoft. But I came from Amazon, where I ran the product and technology for Amazon Business, and this is Amazon's B2B play. I was also the site leader for Austin. We grew our site to around 2,000 people in a very short amount of time. So there's quite a hunger for people to come to work in the southern part of the United States, which I'm very proud of. I was also at Microsoft for quite a while. I started off in the C++ tools. And so I used to own the deep, dark technologies of compilers and runtimes and JITs and things like this. And so that was a lot of fun. I owned some of the new initiatives at Microsoft at the time, such as scientific computing, high performance computing, Unix migration. And then I took an interesting detour over to England for a while, where I was in marketing and sales for developer tools. And then even though that doesn't seem like a very interesting thing for a tech guy to go do, I learned a lot about how things are marketed, how things are sold, what go-to-market strategies were. But before I went back to Redmond, I ended up going to China for 3 years and built out the developer division there. And that was a lot of fun too. I learned a lot about how to build out the site and how the finances work. And that really come into play later when I established the Madrid Tech Center and the Austin Tech Centers for Amazon. And now I'm at Office Depot, so very happy to be here.
Yeah, you've been a little bit everywhere, and obviously big names, Amazon, Microsoft, 2 of the biggest names in technology. But the journey is, really interesting as well. You mentioned with Microsoft, you were also very involved with C++, and that was kind of your a little bit of a claim to fame. Could you dive into that for a second with me?
Yeah, I came to Microsoft from a startup. In the startup, we were building compilers for the embedded world, so microcontrollers, DSPs, and things like that. So it's kind of funny. I was probably one of the few people who interviewed with Microsoft. I had to program an assembly language to get the job, so that was a kind of a dirty thing. But it was really a lot of fun. At that time, the Microsoft C++ compiler was the #1 used C++ compiler in the world, and we were moving to 64-bit. And there was and we had like 20 different versions of the compiler for all different kinds of chips that WinCE and others were running on. So it was quite an interesting challenge. And plus, internally, everybody was using the C++ compiler to build Windows and SQL and Office. So not only did I have a pretty stout set of external customers, I had some pretty onerous internal customers as well. So that was a lot of fun to build the infrastructure for the company like that.
And you mentioned, I think it was United Kingdom, China, obviously the United States. So Microsoft kind of took you a little bit everywhere. Was that kind of your first big push as far as technology leadership, was working with Microsoft, or were you in some roles before that as well that kind of helped get you to where you are now?
Well, most of the roles I had before were deeper technology. Like I said, I wrote compilers for a living before I came to Microsoft. I think the UK was the first time where I actually had a pretty expansive team, and they were also geographically dispersed. So even though I was living in the UK, my team was in France, Belgium, Sweden. So we were all over the place. I covered all of EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa. So everything from England to South Africa, up in north and south, and in Portugal to Russia, west to east was under my domain. So I couldn't visit everybody, but I tried to get as many countries in as I could in the time I was there. So that was a lot of fun. So I visited a lot of countries and got to know a lot of great people while I was there.
Of course, shout out to Office Depot's Andy Perry and Richard Coggins, who are from, of course, England and United Kingdom as well. You can't go to Office Depot without having some connection to the British Isles. So, of course, then after Microsoft, you were with Amazon for a number of years and leading a number of different efforts. But what exactly did you get to dive into there on Amazon? We know it as a consumer-facing platform, but you did a lot of the business side that I don't know if many people, myself, are even that familiar with.
Yeah, when I first started Amazon, I had a couple of job offers. One was would have ended up being owning the developer tools for one of their, I think it was the Fire tablet, but of course they couldn't tell me what it was at the time. And then the other one was kind of in the heart of retail, and it was on the consumer side. We didn't have a B2B offering at that point in time. So I learned a lot about how Amazon works by being kind of in the center of all the stuff that works, because I owned the vendor tools. I owned a couple of different websites, so we sold things that weren't associated with Amazon. One of them was called myhabit.com, which was a high-end fashion site, and they didn't want to put their goods on Amazon because they didn't want to brand degradation, because Amazon was a bit too common for them. So I sold women's clothing, I guess you would say, for a while on their website. But I learned how a bunch of things at Amazon worked, how intricate things were, what the value was of having a deep tech team that ran the website and all the functions. And then I had an opportunity afterwards, because they were starting up a new B2B business, and that was a lot of fun because Amazon hadn't really jumped into the business yet, and it's 3 times the size of the consumer market. And people sometimes don't realize how big the B2B market really is. And Amazon hadn't really touched it very much. A lot of businesses, of course, buy on Amazon.com just for their businesses and expense it or whatever. But this was more of a, how do you get a relationship? How do you get bigger spend on Amazon, and how do you get relationships with larger companies? So it was a lot of fun doing that, because I think in that aspect, the B2B industry was behind the consumer with respect to user experiences. And if you went to a kind of a conference 5 or 10 years ago in procurement, they would have said, when are we going to get an Amazon-like experience for our space? And so hopefully it helped to bring Amazon to that space.
Yeah, so basically you focused on the other side, the back of the house, how your businesses are working to get their products on Amazon, how they're managing that entire sales process. And I think what you're saying is, hey, it's so easy to buy things on Amazon, but selling things wasn't as always easy until you and your teams were able to make some things happen.
Actually, it was both, because there's people who wanted to sell their goods So B2C is businesses selling to consumers, and that's what the normal Amazon site does. And B2B is business selling to other businesses through Amazon. So we were selling to Fortune 100 companies, and they go onto our site and buy things. So it was a more classic B2B model than what I was working on at the end.
So now full circle, you're probably at one of the biggest B2B companies out there in Office Depot, Fortune 500 company. You're selling products and services now all across the globe. What brought you to Office Depot, and what are you excited about now that you're there?
Yeah, I was kind of interesting. Office Depot has an enormous amount of assets. So they have stores. Not everybody has stores. They have a big B2B presence. Not everybody has that. They sell to consumers. They sell both. They have a wide distribution network. So you start looking at all the pieces that Office Depot had is quite compelling about all the things they had, because those are things that are hard to generate, right? You can write software and do some cool things, but without some of these things in place, it's really hard to move things forward. So then I met with Jerry, who's the CEO, Jerry Smith, and he kind of got me excited about the vision that he had for Office Depot. And so things kind of fell into place after that. So I'm really excited about what it could be. I think there's a new day coming for Office Depot, and I'm looking forward to pushing our technology forward.
So what can you share, if anything, about what your goals are and what your plans are? I know you're still new in the role, but what's something you're thrilled about getting started, maybe?
Yeah, I've always kind of my calling cards are around having the customer very high in fact number one in the value chain. So making sure everybody has a great experience in buying their products is a really big deal for me. So one of the things I'm focusing on is moving our shopping experience to another level, making sure that people walk away getting the things they want and being able to find the things that they would like to buy. Office Depot, as you may know, is selling more than office supplies now, and so that's a new venture. Office Depot is of course quite an expert at selling office supplies, and we're going to be trying to sell more things on Office Depot. And then they've got a wide variety of services. Some of them in-house, like printing services, and the purchase of CompuCom, which is a set of IT and other services they have. So they've got quite a portfolio of things to buy. So integrating all that together and making sure that the customers are able to get what they want in a way that makes them very happy is a big deal for me.
So one of the things that's really interesting about your background, you've worked in a few different countries, literally 3 continents, in different leadership roles. What have you seen as differences in workplace culture, or maybe just a country's culture in general that reflects onto the business and the day-to-day there that you could potentially share? It's just maybe some intriguing compare and contrast to what we see here on a daily basis.
Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening for me. I'd traveled overseas, but I lived in the United States for a long time. So I'm really glad I went to the UK first. It was kind of a Europe light, if you will. It was a change, but it wasn't a complete change. China was very, very different. China was going through a very interesting time period where they were trying to modify themselves to be more of a e-commerce or commerce world than they were previously, and they were opening up. And so it was kind of for them, for China, it was very interesting because they were for the first time learning how the Western world really does business, and how they could integrate in and what they could do. So it was a lot of fun doing that because a lot of learning. The UK was a very different experience. What happens when you work for a company is a company has a culture. And then as you go to a different area, you realize that that culture of your company has to marry in somewhat with the culture of the local folks. And so we had to make some changes in some ways in how we dealt with licensing, how we did with human resourcing, how we did with management of people. They have different values associated with each one. And so it was a very different experience in each of these. For example, in China, there was a big push to get promoted and have people report to you. And the company culture at Microsoft was much more around, you spend quite a bit of time as an individual contributor before you move into management, and promotions are a little bit slower. So there was an interesting push and pull there, where you wouldn't have necessarily have seen that in American culture.
Yeah, and I have another note here that you've been to 70 countries so far in life. That is an achievement. Your passport must be really stamped up. But I assume some of that is through work, but a lot of personal as well. But do you have that goal of traveling to all countries, or how is this number come about to be so high?
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a plan. I didn't have a checklist and said, I need to go to these many countries. It's part of the job I had for Microsoft. And of course, I've always liked to travel. So because I covered so many countries when I was living in Europe, the number started racking up there. And I realized I've been to quite a few countries at this point. Now, it's not as glamorous as it always sounds, because sometimes you're in a country and have to leave a couple of days later. But I always tried to spend a little bit extra time in each country I was in to get a feel for the local folks, or enjoy the people, or enjoy the sites. So I always try to do that. But yeah, it's been I had to put extra pages in my passport twice while I was in the UK. So, and in fact, I had 2 passports at one point, because what happens is, if you have to send off for a visa, like traveling to Russia, you lose your passport while they put the visa in. So I had to apply for another passport to keep traveling while my passport was getting the visa approval for another country. So I was running things in parallel at the same time. So people don't always realize you can have more than one passport if you have a valid reason to get one.
Yeah, you're probably the only person I know who is not a secret agent who has multiple passports. But I didn't realize that was a thing either. But I assume if you're in Europe, you're going to a lot of European countries. But what's maybe one of the places or one of the countries that you've been to that's really stands out, maybe the most unique or the most intriguing?
I think one of the ones I had the most enjoyment was in South Africa. And South Africa, of course, has a long history, not all of it great. But it was interesting. You could see South Africa was a very deep dichotomy of some of the most modern buildings and modern technologies you could find anywhere in the world. And right next to that was a really, really shanty town type of environments, and it was heartbreaking at the same time. So it was I've never seen such a contrast in a world like that. And it really kind of shocking and honestly emotional to see it that way. And so I learned a very, very important lesson in life about how I view different people and how I think about things when I saw that. But to me, that was one of my favorite trips. I've been a few times after that, because at Microsoft, we used to have a developer conference in South Africa, and I always volunteered to go to that, even though it was a long way away. And so I have a great affinity for South Africa from that perspective.
And do you have a country that's next on your, well, I'm going to this, I mean, probably not for work, or maybe more for personal, maybe not for a few months or a year at this point, but is there something like, we got to go there, we got to check it out, we haven't been?
Oh, a place I haven't been?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. That's actually a lot smaller. I think I haven't been a whole lot to Southeast Asia, which is, even though I lived in China, I mostly visited Japan, Singapore, Australia. I didn't really go to Southeast Asia very much. So that's kind of one place where I'm kind of missing. If you look at my checklist, that's got a few holes in it right now. So I haven't been to Vietnam, I've been to Cambodia. So I think those are places I'd like to go visit someday.
Yeah, I'd imagine you having like maybe this is just me, but a Google sheet or something of the like of all the different, Microsoft Excel sheet of all the different places. And
I will neither confirm or deny that I have a spreadsheet that has all the countries I visited.
Yeah. So let's go back to technology for a second. You've been doing this your whole career. What's really inspired you to go about and pursue this career in technology, and really kind of kept you waking up every day and being happy and excited to do it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I have some kind of life rules around, you got to be happy at work, you got to be excited at work. When you, and I've been very fortunate. I mean, I'm really blessed to have been able to work for the companies I've worked for. And every day I came to work, and I never dreaded Mondays, never was counting hours on Fridays, kinds of things. So part of it is just making sure that you're in an environment that clearly you're interested in, and you find exciting, and people around you find exciting, and you can feed off of that. I've always had a big affinity for taking technology and bringing it to large numbers of people. Like I said before, Amazon calls it a customer obsession. There's other companies have different words for it, but that's always been a big deal to me. It's kind of those things where there's very few things in life where you can get immediate satisfaction of writing some code and having somebody use it and like it, and you get that instant gratification. There's very few things in life that you get that. Now that I've been a manager for a while, I have to kind of live through my team a little bit, but that doesn't change the fact of seeing delight. I've always said that the best thing in the tech world is writing code and having somebody use it and like it, and the next best thing is writing code, somebody use it and not like it, that gives you feedback. So as long as somebody's using my stuff, I'm really, really happy about it. So that drives me a lot, because being able to talk to people see me in public transit or just in airports and things like that, and if they know I work for a certain company, they have questions about it. And sometimes it's about the technology I own, and that's total strangers, and that's a lot of fun that somebody's actually going to comment on my stuff, and so I feel good about that.
I imagine probably had those conversations like, oh yeah, I do this for Amazon, and people just start lighting up with questions. I'm sure you'll get the same now for Office Depot, but going to the work life right now. I mean, you're obviously working remote. I would assume you've worked remote a number of times through the years, enough that this is nothing new to you. But how do you see the balance now of this whole work-life balance and this whole new working remote culture kind of influencing, not just what you are looking for Office Depot, but the tech industry as a whole, and how we move forward here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think nobody wishes COVID on anybody, but looking at kind of silver clouds and that, I've worked remote from for a lot of my career, and outside of the corporate headquarters for that matter. I was coming up one day, and I think that the last 20 years, 13 of them have been outside the same city my manager worked at. Maybe that's my manager's preference. I don't know, but it's been kind of interesting to have that. And then as we're getting through this, the longer it lasts, the more you're getting used to working, either at your home or working without your team, or even in my case where you're starting a new company and you're onboarding, without getting to meet your people face to face, and it's a bit harder, but we're getting better at it. And I think what the end result could be a range from, look, we're going to be allowing people to kind of work where they are, which I think helps companies, because a lot of times you find somebody you really like, they really like to work with you, but they just can't move to the city that you're in because of usually family reasons or other reasons. And I think that barrier is starting to kind of erode. And I think it also will force the industry to get better at handling remote stuff. Both Microsoft and Amazon were very centric to the headquarters during at least portions of the time I was there. And it'd be interesting to see for companies like that how well they handle people working outside the headquarters. And I think companies that are really very thoughtful and aggressive about it are going to do very well and say, well, we can handle people not all being in the same office. Now, having said that, I think there's some tool improvements we're going to have to go through to get better at it. I still miss writing on whiteboards. It's harder. You can still do it, but it's harder when it's hard to replace a room full of people writing on a whiteboard and having the chatter and the fast interaction that you normally get. So maybe there's some ways to get that better. But yeah, it may have changed things for permanently. And if it does, then we'll have a whole nother set of tools and learnings we're going to have to go through that we may not have done before.
Yeah. And one other personal question too, going back to, COVID, and I'm sure you've had some different free time on your hands, but what have you been doing to get out of the house, spend your time, any hobbies you have, any family time that you've been able to kind of focus on in the last 6 months? What have you been doing with it? How do you go out and just enjoy being who you are and not having the work loom over your head too much?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of my daughters left for school, but then she had to come back when COVID. So I've enjoyed the time with her. She's back in school again at A&M, but that's been really enjoyable. So some of it's just been closeness of family time that we may not have been able to have as easily. I live kind of in a rural area in Texas, so I can go out and walk and go look at the cows and things like this anytime I want. So I'm enjoying just having those kinds of interactions with walking trails and nature. That's a little bit harder to do if you're working directly and indirectly for long periods of time. So for me, that's been great. I don't know if I picked up any new hobbies, but I've certainly been, it hasn't really affected my personal life as much as it would maybe some others because of where I live.
Yeah, I've been trying to get out and do as many outdoors things as I can. I realize I'm not as fit as I would have wished for, but I've been surviving just fine, getting out on the bikes and whatnot. Well, I take that back. I ran into a concrete wall when I biked around Palm Beach the other day.
Oh no.
Yeah, still recovering from that a little bit. It's a great story to tell people. I sound like a genius. That said, one last question for you, and that's, what words of advice would you have for any aspiring technology professionals or technology leaders who are out there in the world today looking to move up in their careers here in South Florida?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I always advise. First of all, I advise not to get into management. Managers, I can say this, but a lot of your management is through muscle memory and experiences that you've had. And so getting as many experiences as a developer, as an IC, as you can before you move up into management is a really good thing. And some people don't ever want to be managers, and I think that's great. In fact, we were creating that environment in my organization and Office Depot where if you don't want to be a manager, that's just great. In fact, the math won't ever work out that way anyway. You can't have 75% of your team being managers. So I'm actually excited about developing that part of our organization. But I think it's really important that, if you're going to be a manager, make sure that that's a passion for you and not just doing it because you need bigger scope or think you have more authority by doing that. There's a great need in the industry for people who are fantastic individual contributors. So getting that right balance is a big deal. I think experiences is a very necessary thing, and I've been very fortunate in my career to have these different experiences. We talked a little bit about me moving to the UK and moving to China. Part of it is the cultural experiences I was able to get, but part of it was also the change in jobs I was able to get too. And so not being afraid to try new things. And if you don't like it or don't feel like that's something you want to do, then go back to doing what you were enjoying it. But don't be afraid to try new things. So I think that's never stop learning, never stop driving yourself forward. Always try to be excellent at every job that you're in, no matter how long you have it. So I think those are kind of my top level things.
Yeah, and good words of advice for sure. And as somebody who's tried to sponge up as much information as possible in my short time, I do very much respect that, especially as a nerd. I do try and pick up every.
You never have to stop being a nerd. See, I'm still a nerd. So I never stop being that. And and you have a lot of fun with your team when you're a nerd. So yeah, I don't. Well, I always said if I have to be not being a nerd anymore, I'll probably go do something else.
One of the things I always enjoy actually is we've done a hackathon with Office Depot and the technology team there for the last couple of years, and it's always fun just to hang out and just talk with the team over there, and a lot of passionate people who are doing some really cool things. So with that, Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone wants to learn more about South Florida Tech, you can go to southfloridatech.com and check out our website and learn more. Also want to give a shout out to our producing sponsors, Media Ops, the premier global media platform for technical communities with brands like DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. Thank you very much to Alan and Brian for producing our podcast there. And of course, thank you once again to Terry and for the entire Office Depot team for supporting our organization for many years now. Look forward to working more with you.
It's great to be here. I'll be remiss if I didn't mention that we were hiring. So
yes,
great developer. We're certainly looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, check it out. Office Depot Careers. There's a lot of really good people over there to join. So Thank you once again, and have a good day, everyone.